The Darth Vader Omnibus collects all the issues of the Darth Vader comic and the events of Vader Down, so that's 25 issues of Darth Vader, Vader Down, which was a one-shot comic that launched the storyline, and 2 issues of Star Wars. All that adds up to 28 issues plus 2 short stories. I've never had a Marvel omnibus before, but this thing is gigantic. I'm used to comics being the standard trade paperback size, or the size of the Dark Horse hardcovers, but the Darth Vader Omnibus is A4 sized, and due to the amount of issues it collects, it's quite thick and hefty. It feels like a proper tome rather than just a collection of 4 or 6 comics. The first arc is called Vader, and it's this arc that ties in directly with the first arc of the Star Wars comic. The book opens after the events of the first 2 issues of the Star Wars comic and sees Vader searching for the one who destroyed the Death Star, as well as being chastised by the Emperor. I thought it was interesting to see the Emperor sitting in the Jedi Council chambers, because apart from mining Ilum for kyber crystals for the Death Star and eradicating all artifacts of the Jedi, taking the Council chambers as his own is just one more way of lording it over the Jedi that he beat them. It's during this arc that we're introduced to Dr. Aphra, BT and 000, and I love all 3 of them. Dr. Aphra is a very tomboyish sort of character, always looking for adventure even when she knows it's bad for her, and her relationship with Vader really reminded me of one of those relationships you see in films, where one person treats the other person so badly, but the other person gets off on it. BT and 000 though are by far my favourite characters in the entire comic. They just stole the show in my opinion. I read 000's parts with Anthony Daniels' voice, and I'm telling you, doing it this way is hilarious with all the murderous comments he spouts. Hearing it with that tone is just so funny. BT was cool enough, and I liked the way the author used him to prompt 000 to proceed with his dialogue, just like R2 does in the films, but on his own, he's just an astromech droid, so doesn't really do much except shoot people and burn things. Eventually the team makes their way to Geonosis to capture a droid factory for Vader's personal use, but they come across the Geonosian Queen. To be honest, I'm sick of so many books going back to Geonosis, and now the comics are doing it too. What makes it worse is that combined with the Clone Wars and Rebels, there really isn't anything else to tell about Geonosis or the Queen, and I wish they would leave it alone now. There's a whole galaxy out there after all. It's the same thing Disney did with Jin and the Ursos. They bled that story dry until there was literally nothing left to tell, and I was sick of it. I wish Disney would learn that it's okay to leave some mystery, and not every storyline character or planet has to have their story told from birth to death. They should let some things go, leave a bit of mystery, and stop oversaturating stories with one particular thing. But hey, Hidalgo doesn't want too much lore, so what are you gonna do? However, one good thing that came out of the trip to Geonosis was watching BT and 000 burn all the Geonosian hybrids, and hearing 000 say, again in Anthony Daniels' voice, "Haha, you're on fire and also dead." Like I said, these 2 are funny as fuck, and they really steal the show. The second arc is called Shadows and Secrets and follows Vader with the help of Aphra, 000, BT and Black Chrysanthemum, which I always read as Black Cranston in my head, in his search for the mysterious ally of the Emperor and immediate threat to his position in the Imperial hierarchy. It's during this arc where I started to question Kieran Gillen's writing abilities for 2 reasons. Vader discovers the Emperor has been seeking a replacement for him since he hasn't grown into the Sith he should have, and tried to kill the Emperor as a good Sith apprentice should. I'm fine with that, it's just the rule of 2, one to have the power and one to crave it. What I'm not fine with is the idea that the Emperor wanted to replace Vader with cyborgs. Cyborgs that aren't even Force sensitive. It's pretty obvious this won't work, because Vader is a cyborg with the Force, so they don't stand a chance, and I knew from that moment that they were all going to die in one way or another. The other issue I had was a Mon Calamari head on a Grievous style body. It just looks stupid. It seemed like a poor design choice because when there are so many species in the galaxy, the fiercest thing they could fit on a mechanical deathbot's body was a fish head? I think they should have done a lot better than that. Ultimately though, Fishboy leads Vader into a trap by telling him Luke's location, and that ties directly into the third arc, which is called Vader Down, and it's the first crossover in the new series of comics, crossing over with the flagship Star Wars comic. It felt like a short arc, but that might have been because there weren't a lot of words, and all the panels tended to be quite big, but it was definitely enjoyable. Highlights for me were seeing R2 and 3PO in a face-off with BT and 000, and seeing Han and Dr. Aphra call each other stupid for trying to snipe next to a wasp nest, and then they shoot each other and hit each other's nests and come out running from the wasps. It was a bit slapstick, but it worked really well. Vader Down also did a good job of showing how much everyone in the rebellion needs to be willing to sacrifice in able to bring the Empire down. Princess Leia in particular showed how much she was willing to lose by choosing to go after Vader instead of helping Luke, who could have been potentially dying, and as always with Leia, it was fun to see Han pushing against her opinions in completely the opposite direction. The Darth Vader annual is the prologue to the fourth arc, which is called the Shu-Torun War, which I always read as Show-Torun in my head. It takes place on a planet that the Empire uses for mining and shows Vader dealing with rebels on the planet and how he manages to keep the rulers in line. It was cool to see the side of Vader where he had to control the leader of a settlement, with the only time I can think of where I've seen that is when he manipulated Lando in Empire Strikes Back. It had its moments like when Vader threatened the princess with a piece of Alderaan, but overall it felt a bit drawn out, and really just seemed to be an arc that led to Vader killing two more of his cyborg rivals. The fifth and final arc is called End of Games, and by the time I read this I was glad the book was coming to a close. It sees Vader end his competition with the other cyborgs and their creator, and to be honest I felt like this should have occurred a fair bit earlier in the story. The problem is that the overall story of all 28 issues revolves around Vader's competition, but that story gets broken up a lot, and at the end of each arc, Vader ends up taking out one of his competitors. So it feels like you read 5 issues, then a death in issue 6, then another 5 issues, then another death in issue 6. I think if the 28 issues had been condensed to 20, and if they'd have mixed it up so you couldn't predict when one of Vader's competitors was going to die, it would have kept everything a bit more exciting. Something I did enjoy in End of Games was watching Vader confront that sissy little bitch Anakin on Mustafar, telling him how he was just a child. I know I've said it before, but this is how I like my Vader, as a completely separate entity from Anakin. I don't want Anakin's emotions showing through all the time like they did in Lords of the Sith, so I appreciate the way they handled it here. There are also 2 little mini-stories, The Misadventures of 000 and BT, and Coda. The former is a little bit of adventure for the droids and shows just how much mayhem they can cause. Imagine a darker version of the droids comics and you're pretty much there. And Coda was just poorly written, poorly drawn, and a waste of time. Just like with Star Wars Volume 1 and the Kanan Omnibus, the Darth Vader Omnibus has a wraparound picture when the dust jacket is removed, and in this case it's an image of Vader standing in Jabba's throne room. The back of the book contains quite a lot of variant cover art when compared with the other hardcovers I mentioned, but then again the Vader Omnibus has twice as many issues in it as any other Star Wars hardcover, so maybe it's not that surprising. There are also about half a dozen pages of Kieran Gillen's writer's notes, but to be honest I couldn't be bothered to read those. Overall, I thought the art was okay. Salvador Larroca definitely has his moments, like every time he draws Vader inside his TIE fighter, but then there are other times, particularly with human characters, where I feel like his line work is just too heavy. Comics generally lend themselves to the idea that not every line needs to be drawn, and quite often the mind will fill in the gaps. That's why quite often you'll see someone's nose, and you may see the start of it as the brow connects to the bridge of the nose, but then the line disappears until you reach the bottom of the nose. That's because those 2 places are where the most shading is, and it's not necessary to draw the middle of the line. Unfortunately though, there are places all over the book where LaRocca has drawn every line he can think of, including when a character is looking straight on, and in those instances it looks particularly bad because it looks like a 6-year-old has drawn it. I also don't like his use of showing Vader using the Force by drawing little white clouds. It's Star Wars, we know about the Force, we don't need our hands held, thanks anyway. Other than that, I thought his art was okay. For me, the best art came in Vader Down and Star Wars issues 13 and 14. I said in my review of Star Wars Volume 1 that I liked the art, and since it's the same series, it's the same artist and it looks as good as it did in the previous book. The art in Vader Down though is exceptional. Mike Deodato Jr. did an amazing job, and seeing Vader fight all those X-Wings in space and seeing the emotion on Luke's face as he rams his X-Wing straight into Vader's tie was amazing, and I hope to see Deodato do more because I was really impressed with what he did in just one comic. So overall, I wouldn't recommend buying the Darth Vader Omnibus unless you're someone who collects the Marvel Omnibuses. You can buy Volume 1 and 2 in hardcover, which collects everything you get here but for 2/3 of the price, or you could get the trades for even cheaper. Don't get me wrong, the content is okay, and it's worth reading the whole way through, I just don't think the omnibus itself is worth the price. Vader had some amazing art, but most of it was just okay in my opinion, and the story could have been condensed more as towards the end it did start to feel like it was dragged out more than it should have been. But that still doesn't make it bad, in fact I did enjoy it all, I just wish it hadn't lost its momentum for the last 2 arcs. I've heard a lot of people say this is all we'll get for Vader between A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. It's true that all the pieces are lined up that way. General Tag is dead, Vader is in command of the Executor, and Vader knows Luke is his son. But I still feel like there are plenty more stories that could be told in this time frame, and the Star Wars comic has been going for twice as long as Darth Vader was, so I wouldn't count out more stories yet. The entire Vader story is definitely worth reading if you can get your hands on it though, and while it's not perfect, it's still one of the more well done comics I've read in the new canon.